I can eventually, I will surprise you. Ooh.
It's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. We're going to call Gardner City Council meeting to order. We'd invite everyone in attendance to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. First item on the agenda this evening is a presentation for post-issuance compliance and recent SEC enforcement actions relating to municipal bonds. Laura, good evening. I spot my favorite bond counsel in the audience as well. Hi, Dottie. Good evening. What do you got for us?
Doesn't this topic sound fun?
Are you kidding? This is going to be a blast.
It's going to be a blast. So, as you all know, among your many duties of both the elected officials and staff are the things that we do that have to do with public financing of infrastructure and other public facilities. And since we're going to be talking about all things related to that for our budget policy direction session coming up, this is a really good time for bond counsel to go through how the SEC is really serious about enforcement, that we don't even accidentally make any misleading statements about the city's finances or anything that could get us in trouble if it should reach the investor market. So ongoing training is actually a requirement of post-issuance debt compliance. Your job does not just stop at deciding to do a project and issuing bonds, but all of us are responsible for making sure that we have continued ongoing compliance. And so Bond Counsel Riley is here to give you a presentation, and Tyler Ellsworth, another public finance attorney with Kutak Rock, is here as well. So some of you have heard it, some of you haven't, and you can just assume that you'll see this at least every 18 months or so. Every time we have an election, this is just ongoing training.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
And Laura, this is what I...
Yes. Right goes forward, left goes back.
Right forward.
Right.
So, most of you know me. I'm Dottie Riley of Kutak Rock. Tyler Ellsworth, he's another member of our public finance group in the Kansas City office. As Laura indicated, this is just a refresher course on your disclosure obligations as a city and as individual officials. Some of you have heard some of this before. Some of you get to hear it for the first time. But it's important for you to have kind of the ability to recognize where there may be a problem or an obligation on disclosure, not only to protect the city from liability, but to protect you individually from liability. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. So when we talk about bonds, every time the city issues bonds, a bond's just a form of a security. It really, in many ways, isn't any different from a corporate stock or bond. And bonds include things that aren't called bonds. It also includes, like, your general obligation temporary notes. It can include certificates of participation, which the city has issued before, certain lease purchase obligations. So just because something doesn't have the name bond in it, it doesn't mean it's not viewed as a bond under federal securities law. If it's in any way kind of an obligation of the city to repay a debt, it's probably going to be classified as a securities under federal securities law. True municipal bonds, when you're issuing debt for streets, sewers, sidewalks, most of those types of bonds are exempt from many of the federal securities requirements. So you don't have to file registration statements with the SEC and do things that corporations have to do But you are subject to what's referred to as the anti-fraud provisions. And the anti-fraud provisions of the Securities and Exchange Act apply in connection with any offering, sale, or purchase of bonds. And typically, those anti-fraud provisions are going to come into play when the city prepares its offering documents, preliminary official statement, the final official statement in connection with the sale of bonds. It also typically comes into play when the city's providing information about the city to rating agencies, because your general obligations debt is rated. But it can also come into play when city officials intentionally or unintentionally kind of speak to the marketplace, is what the term is. And that can that can happen, like I said, just inadvertently, depending on the context of what's going on. Just real quickly, the anti-fraud provisions have kind of two major elements to it. One is that, and I've copied the applicable section of the Securities Act of 33, that it's unlawful for any person to make an untrue statement of a material fact or to omit material information. And I'll provide a little more explanation of that in a minute. I'm sure Laura's probably going to do something really, you probably bind these and give them to them so they can take home, certainly read them at night. So
My copy.
I know. I have a copy of the packet.
You can share this with your family and friends. I'm sure they'll all be really fascinated by it. A material fact is, well, it's really anything, think about it, it's anything you would want to know if you're investing your life savings and you're buying a bond. What do you want to know? What would you view as important to know? I mean, I think there would be obvious things. You'd want to know, if let's say you're buying a city's bond, not your own city, but some other city, you want to know how much debt they have. You want to know if they've ever defaulted on debt before. You want to know if they have professional staff, and if there's some continuity in the staff because they're providing kind of the day-to-day management of the city. You want to know about the elected officials and who they are, and you know, the kinds of things they may have said or not said about making sure that mechanisms are in place to repay their debt. There's a whole raft of things that if you really were concerned about whether or not you were going to get your money back that you had invested, that you would want to know. And those are all going to be material facts. Materiality has been an interesting conversation over the last couple of years. Sometimes it's black and white, and sometimes it isn't black and white. So it's really material to the investor. But there are a number of standard things that are included in offering materials, and I would say to some extent standard precautions about how cities and officials approach providing information about their city. The other issue, is to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, the whole truth is more than just not saying something that's false. It also includes not omitting information that could be considered important to the investor. So it could be that every single thing in your official statement is absolutely accurate, but if you fail to disclose that a third of your city was the property was damaged by some catastrophic event, a tornado or something, if you fail to disclose that, if you fail to disclose that there's some huge judgment against the city that isn't covered by insurance, it doesn't matter that everything else was right if you omitted those kinds of things that may be material. There are three primary types of disclosure, or three basic types of disclosure. One is a primary disclosure, and like I said, that's going to be typically your official statement. There's continuing disclosure, and that is for those of you that haven't heard this before or haven't memorized it. The city, when you issue debt, investors that you will continue to update the marketplace about certain types of things. And that is an ongoing disclosure that you have as long as the debt is outstanding. And the last type of disclosure are, as you mentioned in your earlier statements, reasonably expected to reach the marketplace. Primary disclosure, I already told you what it was, won't go through it again. Continuing disclosure, the only thing I want to add here is continuing disclosure typically is going to include updated financial and operating data about the city, including your financial audits, but you're also required to disclose certain events, and there's a list of them in the SEC rules, whenever those events occur. If you would, if your rating would change, you're not doing a bond issue, but your rating changes because the rating agencies evaluate that rating all the time, whether you're issuing debt or not. You have an obligation to disclose that right away to the marketplace, whether it goes up or down. You have to disclose it because if you think about it, that can affect the value of the bond. If you get a higher rating, your bond should be worth more. If you get a lower rating, the bond should theoretically be worth less. And so that and bonds are traded in the marketplace all the time. It's not just who you sold it to originally. It can be traded over and over again during the period of time the bonds are outstanding. Statements reasonably expected to reach investors and the markets. And this is kind of a new aspect of disclosure with respect to municipalities. But we've seen from the enforcement actions that the SEC is looking at all kinds of things with respect to municipal issues that historically they weren't focusing on. So your website for your city, it's important that all the information on your website be accurate and not have anything in it that could mislead investors. So that means there should be some systems in place to update it, because stale information can end up being very misleading information, and it needs to be kind of vetted to make sure that accurate information is included there. It can include communications that you provide as public officials. So, a state of the city address by a mayor, that kind of information that can get out into the marketplace. When you're talking about the city's financial and operating data in particular, it's important that you make sure you're being very accurate about what you're describing. And if you're not sure, then it's better to hold off providing that information until you can double check with them. SEC enforcement actions, and I'm going to hand it over to Tyler for a few minutes. I've included here a quote from SEC Commissioner made in 2013, and I won't read the whole quotation to you, but essentially what the SEC has been very clear about is that you as the officials have responsibility for disclosure, and if you as officials fail to do that in a way that's consistent with the SEC requirements, then the SEC believes that you should be held accountable for it. So Tyler is going to share with you briefly some of the more notable SEC enforcement actions that have happened in recent years.
Thanks, Dottie. As Dottie mentioned, over the last several years, starting around 2010, the SEC has really made a point of sort of bringing a series, and now there are about a dozen of them, as you can see from the list here, of high-profile cases involving states, involving municipalities, and even involving officials in whether they're municipal governments or state governments, that the SEC has fallen short of their disclosure obligations. And they brought these high-profile cases to sort of hammer the point home that the SEC takes these disclosure obligations seriously. As Dottie mentioned, it's a matter of being accurate when you're making representations to the market, whether that's in an offering document in connection with a bond issue, whether that's in a mayor's address, or any other kind of opportunity where you're providing information to the public, a website, something like that. So as you mentioned, we've sort of selected 4 of these enforcement actions, which illustrate different items that have been sort of firsts for the SEC as they've ramped up their enforcement against these disclosure failures as they've seen them. The first of these enforcement actions is in 2010. The SEC brought an enforcement action against the state of New Jersey, and the SEC alleged that the state had failed to disclose its pension obligations, specifically unfunded pension obligations, and offering materials in connection with bonds that the state issued. This was the first SEC enforcement action against the state. And typically the way these work, the SEC brings its charges and there's an investigation, and the entity or the individual charged settles with the SEC. And then they release a statement, there's sort of a press release, and the charges are announced. At the same time, a settlement is announced and the terms of that settlement become public. So in the state of New Jersey, there was a settlement, and the state agreed to a cease and desist order and other remedial measures to make sure that the disclosures going forward that they were making were accurate and weren't omitting anything. It was helpful that the state had taken remedial measures during the course of the investigation. The state cooperated with the SEC. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in our world, this was a huge deal because the SEC had never gone after a public entity before. And I think part of the reason for that is that generally speaking, municipal debt has been viewed as a very secure debt, and there have been very few defaults or problems. Cities didn't go bankrupt, but cities and counties have gone bankrupt, over the last 8-10 years. There have been changes in the whole arena, which has kind of encouraged, I'm sure, the SEC to start looking in a lot more detail as to what states and cities are doing. And like I said, in our world, when all of a sudden there was enforcement action against the state, that was a major event.
So, continuing on, thanks, Patty. The second of the 4 enforcement actions that we wanted to highlight is another one of these really significant sort of watershed moments for SEC enforcement actions. And this was an enforcement action against officials that were city officials with the city of San Diego. There's actually a separate enforcement action against the city itself, but what was significant about the action against the city officials was that they were held liable in their personal capacities. And again, like the New Jersey action that the SEC brought, the allegation was a failure to disclose pension obligations and retiree health care obligations and offering materials for bonds. The SEC alleged that there were certain shortfalls relating to pension and health care obligations that couldn't be made up, that these officials were aware couldn't be made up without increasing taxes or cutting spending somewhere else, but this information was inaccurately presented to the marketplace through these offering materials. And as a result, there was again a settlement, and there were 5 city officials that the SEC sought charges against. 3 of the city officials were fined $25,000 apiece. 1 official was fined $5,000 apiece, and the 5th, I don't think, settled with the SEC, and I think maybe that was because there wasn't enough evidence in that case. But essentially, the takeaway is that the SEC is interested in what gets said and what gets presented, and they're willing not just to go after the states and the municipalities, but they're willing to go after the individual actors, depending upon the facts of the particular case. Another example is in Wenatchee, Washington, and that was more recent. That was in 2013, and it was actually, the city of Wenatchee was part of a regional development district, and the project at issue was an event center and hockey arena. And the SEC alleged in their enforcement action that the development district had failed to disclose questions about the project's viability and also the city's ability to issue and sustain long-term debt after they issued the initial notes to finance this facility. This was a first, enforcement action was a first for the SEC to the extent that there was a financial penalty issued against a municipal issuer. The development district settled with the SEC, entered a cease and desist order, but the district itself was fined $20,000. So again, this was another first, another big deal in our world in terms of what the SEC is interested in pursuing.
I'd imagine that whoever was buying the bonds was probably pretty angry at whoever was suggesting them to them.
They
Well,
They were.
I would think so. And in a number of these enforcement actions, sometimes there are also enforcement actions against the underwriter of the bond, the purchaser of the bond. So we're focusing on the municipal liability, but almost all of these matters also include companion actions against underwriters. So you make a good point. So there are a lot of players here that all have liability, potentially, if there are problems.
sure.
And the fourth of the enforcement actions that we wanted to present as examples this evening is from Allen Park, Michigan, and that was announced in November of this past year, so it's not even a year old at this point. The SEC in the enforcement action alleged that there were false and misleading statements made by the city officials, the mayor, and the city administrator. And the project at issue in Allen Park, Michigan was a film studio. At the time, the state of Michigan had film tax credits, and so they were probably on the more lucrative end of tax credits offered nationwide. And so the city was going to, as an economic development measure, build this film studio. It had 8 sound stages. It had an executive director from Hollywood, and it was going to be this great thing for the community. And as events sort of unfolded, the scope of the project was ratcheted back and ratcheted back. While the mayor was out advocating for the project, making speeches and so forth to the public, the scope of the project was reduced to essentially a vocational school for the surrounding community. The offering materials didn't reflect this. They reflected the scope of the original project. And as a result, the mayor was fined $10,000, and the city administrator and the mayor both were barred from participating in future bond issues, which, as you might imagine, I think is pretty much the end of their municipal career. The significance of this case is really that this was the first time the SEC used a legal principle called control person liability. And what that means essentially, lawyers have difficulty articulating what this is, courts have difficulty articulating it, and it's not used, frankly, that often. But just to give you sort of an example, if you own a company and you say to your employee, my iPad's at my neighbor's house next door, can you run over and grab that? Turns out it's not your iPad, it's the neighbor's iPad. And so the employee dutifully goes next door and retrieves it, brings it back to you. That's a crime. And it's not a crime to the extent that the employee knew there was something wrong, but it's using somebody else to do something that you as an individual couldn't do yourself that's the problem. And that's essentially what control person liability is. And in this case, in the Allen Park case, the mayor and the city administrator were in daily contact. And part of the charges against the mayor were that the mayor was a control person with respect to the actions of the city administrator in signing off on the official statement, communicating this information to the market that turned out to be incorrect.
Does that all sound like fun? Okay, just real quickly, I'll only take a couple more minutes here, and then certainly if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Now that we've told you about all the problems we have, it seems only fair that we tell you a little bit about what you can do to prevent problems. So I'm going to go through a few items, just big picture-wise, that we would recommend that you focus on. One is to maintain strong internal mentioned earlier, it's important, especially with respect to financial and operating data, that information be vetted before it's disclosed to the public. If possible, that you have a central source of providing that information, and that you provide checks and balances on how to make sure things are taken care of. So the website, for example, there should be checks and balances to know you don't have one person doing everything. Somebody else needs to be reviewing it and making sure it's accurate. Your official statements that you've used in the past and that you will use going forward, you should read it. You really should read it. It's your offering document, not mine. It's yours. You should read it, make sure you understand what's in there, and that you agree with what is in there. You may think of things that no one else has thought about because you have kind of a unique perspective on the city that everyone else doesn't have. Second step is provide training, and as Laura indicated, under the city's policies and procedures, you have indicated you will do that. You will provide training for yourself and for your staff. Keep the big picture in mind. Sometimes, we all have urgencies in our life, and we want to get something said, something done, whether it's the official statement or some other piece of the website or whatever vehicle we're using to provide information. We recommend that you take whatever time is necessary to really make sure that information is correct. I have issuers where, particularly if they have sensitive disclosure issues, where a group of people will spend days parsing over a single word or two to make sure it is absolutely accurate how we're describing a particular situation. Everyone involved with the information needs to really kind of do their own due diligence and don't just rely exclusively on somebody else to do the job. Don't avoid disclosing bad news. We see this happen more frequently with issuers that don't go into the market very often, and they want to use their offering documents as a PR piece. They want to say everything is wonderful about the city, and there can be lots of things that are wonderful about the city, but it's important to also indicate anything that maybe isn't as wonderful, anything that may be a risk associated with the debt, anything that could be of concern to investors. Make sure that the bad is disclosed with the good, because both of those things are important. Hire experienced professionals to assist with disclosure. Don't need to say anything else. And just in conclusion, try thinking about the whole process from the bond owner's perspective, because they have no way of knowing what the value of your bonds are except for the information you give them. So think about it from their perspective and treat your obligations in this respect as one where they're an important player in this process. So that is it. If you have questions.
Questions?
We've all stayed awake, so I'm pleased.
It's early in the meeting. So, no, we appreciate you coming as always. We like it better when you're saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars, along with our financial team.
And you know what? This could save you hundreds of thousands of
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, there was something in there about the mayor getting fined $10,000. We don't want to do that.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make public comments, approach the podium and state your name and address for the record before being heard. With no one coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion motion Harrison, second Melton, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. Next item, committee recommendations. Committee item number 1 is consider approving the final plat for Nickel Intermodal, located at the northeast corner of Waverly Road and 191st Street. Larry, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight, you're looking at the final plat, FP-15-04, which is actually a plat in the next community over. This is brought to us by them. They have already approved it preliminarily and finally. However, there is some information that some changes have come along that we will have adapted into our final plat that will allow them to complete the process. So this is to consider the approval of the final plat for the Nickel Intermodal located at the northeast corner of Waverly Road and 191st Street. FP-15-04 is the area that's shown in red on the subject parcel. The next picture will show you that property in relationship to the Gardner City boundaries and to Edgerton and some small part of an island of Johnson County. The small blue rectangle in the middle of the black outlined area is the property which we have a permanent easement on, and is where the sewer lift station that is owned and operated by Gardner resides. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the final plat for Nickel Intermodal. First final plat, Lot 1 and Tract A, subject to the following conditions. 1, the required excise tax shall be paid prior to release of the final plat for recording. And 2, minor adjustments to the plat name, title description, legal description, surveyor's note number 7, Edgerton Mayor and City Council certifications, and monument symbology are made on the final plat prior to signing. There are some technical items that were brought up after we brought this final plat at our Planning Commission. They were told to the Planning Commission, and they approved it subject to these provisions so that it could be carried forward in a timely manner for the City of Edgerton. Planning staff recommendations is to approve the final plat for Nickel Intermodal. First final plat, Lot 1 and Tract A, and forward the final plat to the governing body with the recommendation of approval subject to final conditions. Repeating, the required excise tax shall be paid prior to release of the final plat, and that the minor adjustments to the plat name, title description, legal section, etc. shall be made and added at the Planning Commission meeting. That was done. This is a picture of the subject property. The fenced area is the lift station itself. The small road that is to the right is the ingress and egress that is used for approaching that off of Waverly Road. The rest of the subject property is shown back behind. This is the total final plat in its total. Lot 1 is the 20.26 white area. There are several drainage easements located in the ground, and the Tract A is actually kind of a wetlands area, which is part of the floodplain and would be dedicated to that. The areas in gray are the street easements that will be dedicated off of this plat to the existing streets of 191st and Waverly Road. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the final plat for Nickel Intermodal, first final plat, Lot 1 and Tract A. And the suggested motion is shown, approval of the final plat, Nickel Intermodal, first final plat, Lot 1 and Tract A, subject to the following conditions as read before. Are there any questions?
Well, we'll open the floor to public comments first. If there's anyone in attendance that would like to make public comments regarding committee recommendation number 1, now is your opportunity to step to the podium and be heard. No one coming forward. Questions for Larry regarding committee recommendation item number 1? Not really anticipating any, and as such, I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion, shoot, second winners, that we approve the final plat for Nickel Intermodal, first final plat, Lot 1 and Tract A, subject to the conditions, 1, required excise tax shall be paid prior to the release of the final plat for recording. 2, minor adjustments to the plat name, title description, legal description, surveyor's note number 7, Edgerton Mayor and City Council certifications, and monument symbology are made on the final plat prior to signing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? Committee item number 1 passes. New business item number 1, consider appointing, voting, and alternate delegates for the 2015 League of Kansas Municipalities Conference. The League of Kansas Municipalities is hosting an annual conference of its members. This year's event will take place October 10th through the 12th in Topeka. State law provides that the governing body of each member city of the league may elect city delegates from the city officers to represent the city in the conduct and management of the affairs of the league. These bylaws provide the city voting delegate or alternate delegate qualifies by having his or her city title and address registered with the executive director. So, with the upcoming conference, we're looking for volunteers to serve. I will go ahead and what's that? I will go ahead and volunteer for one of them, as I plan to attend, and, let's make sure that we get our reservations in for people that do plan to attend. Is there anyone else that's planning to attend and would like to be a voting delegate?
The date again?
Yeah,
10 through the 12th.
It's a Monday.
Yeah, it's Monday the 12th.
What is Wednesday?
Some of the things that they vote on during the business meetings can be pretty
Monday.
generic and mundane. Some of them can be a lot more interesting.
The more voters we have there, is there,
There's probably not an advantage necessarily to,
whereas one vote sufficient?
there's enough people in the audience that, having an extra 3 people probably isn't going to sway things one way or another.
I'll be on. I'm going anyway, so,
Very good, we have 2.
I was gonna nominate Lee, 'cause I'm good at that.
Yeah.
I could actually be the 3rd person on that.
Fantastic.
All right.
Okay. And anybody that's planning on attending, let's make sure that we get in touch with, should it be Ann or Jeannie? Jeannie we've got 3 people that are already, I don't know if you've registered me yet or not, but I do want to attend.
If we could get everybody any additional. If we can get any additionals this week, so we can go ahead and get it registered, please.
Yeah. I think there's still probably time to get the
Yes.
early registration discount.
Save some money, right, Rich?
Okay.
Well, I'm bunking with you, so.
Oh,
All right, so we're going to have,
You're on the floor, dude.
we're going to end up having 3 different motions. I would entertain a motion on Councilmember Shute.
So moved. Second.
Motion Moore, second Winters, to appoint Councilmember Shute as voting delegate number 1 to the 2015 League of Kansas Municipalities Conference. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Councilman Shute, congratulations as being elected as a voting delegate. I'd entertain a motion to appoint Councilmember Melton as a voting delegate.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Shute, that we appoint Councilmember Melton as voting delegate number 2 for the 2015 League of Kansas Municipalities Conference. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Congratulations, Rich.
Thank you.
I'd entertain a motion to appoint Mayor Morrow as voting delegate number 3.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Winters, second Melton, that we appoint Mayor Morrow as voting delegate number 3 for the 2015 League of Kansas Municipalities Conference. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Goody, get to go to Topeka. Well, at least the legislature's not in session. New business item number 2, consider authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Sterling Construction for the 2015 CDBG downtown sidewalk and ramp reconstruction project. Brian, welcome back to the podium.
Mayor. Back in 2014, the city did apply for the 2015 CDBG grant. Maximum we could apply for each year is $100,000. That's what the city applied for, and the project was reconstruction of sidewalks and ramps to improve accessibility, consistent with the guidelines established by the Americans with Disabilities Act. The project area you have before you is bounded by Madison on the north, Moonlight east, the railway tracks on the south, and Center Street on the west. A majority of the construction or reconstruction work is located in and around downtown. On the map before you see stars, those are the areas that we'll be working. Staff did identify and prioritize sidewalks and ramps based on the volume of pedestrian traffic and the condition of the sidewalk and ramps. The original project scope was determined by estimating the amount of improvement that could be made within the project budget of $120,000. That includes the $100,000 from CDBG and an additional $20,000 from the city. Staff did use recent bid activity for our estimates. As the bids received exceeded the project budget, which you can see in your table substantially, the unit prices for the bid items were quite higher than what we had anticipated. The scope of work and quantity were reduced. We did check with the grant administrators to verify that it was acceptable to reduce the scope of work. The low bidder, Sterling Construction, did agree to maintain their unit prices with the revised scope of work. Staff did set the revised contract at $110,000 with an additional $10,000 in reserve for change orders to cover unanticipated field conditions. Staff did check references for Sterling Construction, which is known staff had actually worked with them before, and the references came back excellent. The financial impact of the project to the city will be a maximum of $20,000 from the Capital Improvement Reserve Fund. The county, through the Community Development Block Grant, will reimburse the city in the amount not to exceed $100,000. The suggested motion is to authorize the city administrator to execute a contract with Sterling Construction for the 2015 CDBG sidewalk ramp, downtown sidewalk and ramp reconstruction project in an amount not to exceed $110,000, and authorize the city administrator to approve change orders up to a contract maximum of $120,000.
Thank you, Brian. We'll open the floor for public comments regarding this new business item. Anyone in attendance wanting to make public comments? With no one coming forward, questions for Brian regarding new business item number 2.
Brian, you said that the scope of the project had been substantially reduced to be able to come in at the $110,000 number. What portions of the scope were removed?
Actually, we had to work all the way along Main Street, and so we started pulling back towards more the downtown area.
So the portions on Main Street that are east of the old CenturyLink building are the ones that were removed?
Most of what we're doing is ramps. There are some small sections of sidewalk. ADA guidelines are on, crosswalks 2%. Anywhere you have a sidewalk, if you have a differential supplement of more than 1/4 of an inch, that's a trip hazard. There's just a lot of things to follow. So our biggest concern, quite honestly, was to get the ramps up to speed.
Are there areas that will be where we're adding ramps, not just replacing?
Well, not adding. Well, one area that we'll be adding ramps by the school, right across from the water tower. We have a ramp on the south side, but we don't have a ramp on the north side, so we have a crosswalk that leads people to a raised curb. So we'll do that. The other ramps, some of them don't have the truncated domes, the red panels with the bumps. That's the standard for detectability. And other issues, Quite honestly, the slope of the ramps, very precise on what you have to do. So we've gone through and measured them all. And like I said, we're working up to 110,000. If we don't encounter any unanticipated field conditions, we would continue to push some additional ramps till we got to that 120.
I apologize if you've already covered this, but how long is it gonna take?
Actually, 30 days. The contract, scope of work says 30 days. If council approves tonight, we would issue a notice to proceed on Monday. And then weather dependent, they would have until mid-October. We'd like to get it done by October 31st, at worst case.
Any other questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion, for new business item number 3.
So moved. Second.
Motion Harrison, second, that we authorize the city administrator to execute a contract with Sterling Construction for the 2015 CDBG downtown sidewalk and ramp reconstruction project in an amount not to exceed $110,000, and authorize the city administrator to approve change orders up to a contract maximum of $120,000. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention? New business item number 3 passes. Yeah. Okay. All right, new business item number 4, adopt a resolution accepting, no, sorry. New business item number 3, consider approval of an amendment to the purchasing policy for geographic preference, local preference, in purchasing and contracting. Laura, welcome back.
Good evening. So, at the council's request, we've added, staff's worked on adding in suggested geographic preference language, or commonly known as local business preference. We just redid the whole big purchasing policy January 2014, so this is the only thing that we would recommend changing, is at your request, the geographic preference policy. The policy is intended to give an advantage qualifying local businesses or bidders in the award of public contracts or any other way that we expend public funds. As you noticed in the council action form, I did caution that anything having to do with some of our common resources for funding start at the federal level with federal money. And in those cases, a local business can still bid, but we can't use our geographic preference of within 5%. So, that is strictly prohibited. So that's why I added in the language about we won't be doing it with federal grants. A perfect example, these CDBG ramps you just approved. We would not have done the local preference policy for that. So with that, I can briefly go through for the benefit of the audience what the language says. It says whenever the city of Gardner obtains quotes or bids for goods or services, and the low quote or bid is submitted by a vendor domiciled outside the city of Gardner, a vendor domiciled inside the city of Gardner may be deemed the preferred vendor and awarded the quote or bid if all the following conditions are met, and I will paraphrase. Goods or services are not subject to federal grant money or anything else with federal money. They have to be a real business location. It can't be a Dropbox, P.O. box, or anything that might be something that's not really there. Quality, suitability, and usability of the goods and services or other performance requirements fully comply with the city's quoted specifications. The amount of the local business is not more than 5% than the lowest bid. And the bidder shall submit proof to the city demonstrating that the business is not delinquent on any City of Gardner property taxes, assessments, permits, licensing fees, or utility charges. Purchases which provide a financial benefit to a current City of Gardner employee or current City of Gardner governing body member are prohibited unless disclosed in writing to the city administrator for review by the governing body and solicited and authorized in compliance with the policy in general. So, it was your suggestion. What do you think?
Okay. Well, let's open up for public comments just briefly. If there's anyone that would like to make public comment regarding new business item number 3. Now would be your opportunity. With no one coming forward, questions for Laura regarding new business item number 3?
Where did was there any reason for the 5%?
Because what the things that I read out there, that seemed to be kind of the benchmark. So
Okay.
you want it to be something different, that's certainly up to you, but that was everything that I read, and the information provided by MVP was pretty much, any time it mentioned a percentage, it was 5.
And 5% is pretty much that's a reasonable standard, especially given the fact that we are trying to save money. We don't wanna be needlessly spending money in a differential bid.
You're giving an advantage already, so is 5%
The geographic
advantage enough?
advantage is significant already, so.
Yeah, generally what you see with policies and jurisdictions is the range is 5 to 15%. The more liberal communities will have the 15%, and that's generally when times are good. The more conservative communities that are trying to help local businesses go with a 5% number.
I had a question on number 5, submitting proof to the city demonstrating that the business is not, et cetera. So, is that typically lie on them for the burden of proof, or what are you expecting with that? I mean, there's several things listed there. Do they have to
Well, they
bring it
can, if they've paid their taxes, they can go out on Ames and print off a receipt that says they paid their taxes or their assessments. If they've paid their city utility bill, we'll know.
Well, that's us, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess the concept is, I don't think the burden of proof should be on the city employees. I mean, not that we won't double check it, but it's just as easy for them to go to Ames and print off, yes, I paid my taxes, than for the city staff to try to figure out, are you the owner, are you not the owner, are you, property ownerships may or may not line up with whoever the business is, and that's a lot of research. We'll put the language in the contract stuff, and they'll be expected to provide if they've paid their due diligence to the city or whatever.
Once they've submitted that, they won't have to continually do it every time is it not? Or you want?
No, they're gonna have to do it every time, because they could be delinquent between one time they bid and another time they bid on anything,
Okay.
so.
Most of the time, this is all stuff that's available online.
Most of the time.
Right.
Once you bookmark the pages, it's just a matter of going
Right.
back in a couple of mouse clicks.
I just wanted to be sure we didn't get into any delinquent special assessment things,
I
delinquent.
appreciate that. We give them-
City,
Yeah.
sometimes city utility bills can get really, really large, and it's like, you really wanna bid on the city stuff, and you owe us several thousand already, and I don't think you need the 5% advantage, so.
Correct.
Right.
And the burden here is, the burden of proof is the threshold of the burden of proof is not that great.
No, they should be able to provide this.
Absolutely. It's better if one individual do it for you rather than you having to do it for all the different contractors.
I like the way you think.
Makes sense.
Thank you, appreciate that. Because this is just one component of what finance department does, and then try to alleviate some of the burden for things that are simple to do.
Sure.
Other questions, comments?
I'm glad we're finally here, that's all I want to say.
I want to say, they brought this up in maybe May?
April?
April, yeah. That's, sometimes it takes a little while to
Speed of
get it,
government.
get it there, but,
Understand.
And this
We're not
nice,
exactly good.
this nice little succinct piece is, there was a lot of research behind it, especially back to we can't do it for federal grants. I mean, I didn't want to bring you something and say, oops, whoops, hold on. You wouldn't appreciate that, so.
Oh, that whole budget thing.
And there's that budget thing,
Both
yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
Both budget thing.
It gets in the way more times than you imagine, so. Okay, other questions regarding the new business item? If not, I'd entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion Melton, second Moore, that we approve the amended purchasing policy. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? New business item number 3 passes. New business item number 4, acceptance of public infrastructure in the Copper Springs 3 subdivision. Brian, welcome back to the podium.
Evening, Mayor. The final plat for Copper Springs 3 was accepted by the City Council on January 5th of 2015 and included accepting easements and rights-of-way. The developer recently completed construction of the public infrastructure, including streets, water, and wastewater. Wastewater for this area flows to Johnson County wastewater, and those improvements were accepted by Johnson County in July of 2015. Staff feels that the City Council, upon recommendation from staff, that the infrastructure was installed per our specifications, should formally accept the improvements into the city system. It is our intention to continue to bring public improvement projects to the council for acceptance. This is something different than what we've done before, but we'd like the City Council to be aware of when we feel improvements are properly completed and should be accepted by the city. The developer is required to post a 2-year performance and maintenance bond for the public infrastructure. The bond protects the city against material and workmanship defects during the warranty period. Maintenance costs after the 2-year period are the responsibility of the city. Staff would recommend the motion to adopt Resolution 1932, accepting the public street and water main improvements installed within Copper Springs 3 subdivision. And I would add a note that when we do accept public streets, we include stormwater with that. So I mean, from the staff's perspective, streets, curbs, stormwater, those things all feed together.
We know if we're anticipating any development on these parcels sometime in the near future?
Actually, I think we've released, I think they submitted like at least 9 plot plans already, been staked out, so they're ready to go.
Fantastic. Did we open it for public comment? Okay. Public comments regarding new business item number 4. Wasn't anticipating that, kind of getting through these fast.
Easements, you know.
Questions?
No?
I'd entertain a motion for resolution 1932.
So moved. Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, that we adopt resolution number 1932, accepting public streets and water main improvements installed within Copper Springs 3 subdivision. City Clerk, can you call roll, please?
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Melton?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Councilmember Shute?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Resolution 1932 passes. Brian? We're going to consider holding an executive session to discuss matters related to the Gardner Municipal Airport covered under attorney-client privilege. Brian, what are you thinking?
Cheryl and I were just talking about that 15, 20 minutes.
Say 20?
Let's say 20, just so we don't have to do the dance.
Yeah, that's fine. Make a motion to recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319, subsection B2, to discuss matters related to the Gardner Municipal Airport covered under attorney-client privilege, beginning at 7:58 p.m., returning to regular session at 8:18 p.m.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Moore, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75.
Yeah.
Beginning at 7:58 p.m. and returning to regular session at 8:18 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention? We'll stand. Too bad.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, and my husband was there with somebody else on my ticket tonight. Don't tell me.
All right, I would entertain a motion to enter back into regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Harrison, that we return to, regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? We're back in session. We're through with the executive session, and we will move on to council updates. We'll start on the council side this time, and we'll finish up with updates from staff after council's had an opportunity to talk. Lee, you have any council updates?
Yes. Because of the recent discussions that we've had on the airport and the audit findings and some of the legal concerns that we were just briefed about, I would like to get a consensus to see if we can move forward to direct staff to provide 90 days notice to the airport board to let them know that we'd like to terminate the lease agreement. And then further, we would also like to provide the administrative services through the city and create an advisory board using the same members currently have.
So, let me get this straight, just for consumption on the dais too. When we're talking about terminating the lease, we're talking about the original agreement, and the one that was in
The
1958?
92 lease.
Or 92 lease?
Right.
Or both?
Well, they'd be repealing the,
We'd be repealing the ordinance.
in 58.
Which delegated the supervision, what I'm hearing, and then replacing that with an advisory board, and then terminating the lease, which is in favor of the corporation.
And doing that as soon as possible.
Next meeting, could we do that by next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's, finance and accounting through the city's finance and accounting department, and I believe, Brian in Public Works would probably be the staff contact for the airport board, yes? The advisory board?
Getting your wings.
All right.
Brian?
You'll certainly get lots of offers from, people out at the airport to take you up, so, as long as they don't drop you down out. So,
Be real selective on the accepting of those.
all right. Lee, do you have anything else?
That's it.
Christie, you got anything?
No.
Steve?
Nothing right now. I know we've got a work session, scheduled for next week on some pretty important stuff, but, going back to the airport board, I want to make it clear on the record that this is not an indictment in any way of the individuals who are managing the airport. They've done a really good job. I think that the concern is really more from an audit perspective, making sure we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's, and basically giving them some assistance, talking about, with regards to the accounting stuff that we've, that's been a concern, and some other things. So, I just wanted to make that clear on the record, that that's why I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, I believe that, the municipal airports operated, as fair and honestly as they can for the last
Absolutely.
58 years. And, we appreciate all that, and we look forward to the current members, hopefully, continuing to serve on the advisory board if, action is taken at the next council meeting. So,
Thanks.
anything else, Steve?
That's it, Brian.
All right. I've got a couple of things, and then I'll let it go, to my left. It was brought up earlier about the League of Kansas Municipalities annual meeting. For those of you that haven't looked into it, please look into it. If you haven't signed up, Jeannie will track you down for us. I definitely would recommend it. Steve and I went last year, and I tell you what, there's been some great presentations. You come back with really good ideas.
And if you want to hear me sing karaoke.
I've heard that he sings karaoke as well.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that probably just turned Rich completely off.
Yeah.
Stay on there now.
Yeah. A couple other quick things. Back in May at the league meeting and the Kansas Mayor's Association meeting, I got elected Northeast Regional Chairperson for the Kansas Mayors Association. And one of the duties is that we've got to host a regional training event. So before we get back to our next council meeting, it's just for the mayors, but there's going to be one held September 19th at one of the local middle schools. There's 84 cities in the, no, 184 cities in the Northeast region. I don't know how many of them might come, but anyway, we're going to have a bunch of, highfalutin mayors in town a week from Saturday. So, two other quick things. I heard from a property owner, and I'm going to direct this towards, in Larry's direction. I heard from a local resident. There's a property, and it's been discussed previously. It's on South Center Street, about 185th, just south of Sherman Lake Estates, on the west side of the road, and right before you get to 186th Street on the east. The property is got multiple buildings that appear in disrepair and in some cases falling down, rusting, looking like inoperable vehicles. There's trailers, and it's just a mess. I know that I have talked to code enforcement long before you got here, and before we had an entire turnover in the staff there even, about the property. I was wondering if you could just look and see, have there been any complaints made? Have there been any citations issued? Has there been any follow-up with the property owner? But I've got a complaint. It was an anonymous complaint, but that would like to see something done about what they thought might be multiple code violations on that property. And, if you could just, by next council meeting, maybe give us an update on what you found out about it, that'd be great. And then the last thing, I was talking to a local downtown merchant, with the, we've had the intersection at Main and Center Street's been completed for about a year now. And with the CVS coming in and with some of the truck traffic coming through town, making that either left or right turn onto South Center Street, we changed the truck routes, was it last year or 2013? I know. It certainly seems like it's happened a lot. But I've heard from actually more than one downtown business owner that would like to see maybe if we could discuss eliminating Center Street south of Main as a truck route to eliminate getting some of that truck traffic heading that direction.
We did talk about that. We had a long discussion about it.
I know we did, but I know that actually somebody contacted me today about it as well. Apparently yesterday there was another accident at the intersection, although it was on the northeast corner. Might have taken out a tree over there by the Patriots Bank. I've driven through the intersection on plenty of occasions, and you know what? The intersection seems to operate perfectly well unless there's trucks lining up to make that left-hand turn.
Yes.
So my question to the governing body is there consensus to maybe look at, we're down to basically Center Street south of Main, US 56, which we have no control over at this point, and Moonlight north of Main. With the upcoming increased traffic issues around the intersection, does anybody want to talk about eliminating South Center Street as a truck route?
Well, ironically, and I mean this in all sincerity, ironically, with the opening of the north entrance at Waverly, we'll probably not see very many trucks turning left. They'll come right through downtown. So I would be open to looking at it again, but, I mean, I don't think that there's a, I don't know if there's a consensus. I mean, we've had this discussion, three previous councils have had the same discussion.
I think we had, last time, I mean, I realized it was Councilman Fodovich, and he was advocating for it.
Well, so was I.
I honestly, I think there was a certain amount of traction. I don't know, maybe there'd been a different messenger. It might have changed somebody's opinion. Anyway, can I get a consensus count here about whether or not we'd be interested in looking at that?
I mean, I think that we probably need to take a look at what our most recent numbers are with regard to,
Sure.
you know, just, you know, what our truck counts are. I know I have seen a lot of trucks coming through downtown, going out west of town, finding that there's no entrance there, turning around and then making a right-hand turn going south on Center Street. I actually followed one just a couple of days ago, because I saw it happen, and I went down, they went right down south on Gardner Road and then turned right onto 191st and headed out to the intermodal. And I have a feeling that's gonna happen more and more as the intermodal truck traffic ramps up. I'd like to be able to stop that kind of traffic.
Well, and I think I would, you know, I talked with somebody that's in operations over at CenturyLink, he's a board member with the EDC board.
Yeah.
I mean, and Christie, you might know this, but apparently they're redoing, the way they're redoing the parking lot in front of the CenturyLink building on Main Street was to keep them from, was to make it in such a way so that trucks couldn't, tractor trailers and dump trucks and stuff couldn't turn around using the CenturyLink parking lot.
Yeah.
I think more and more people are probably going to be of the opinion that we should, be restricting truck traffic whenever
I
possible.
think the best way to restrict truck traffic is to debadge 56.
Right, move 56 over.
You know, I'm thinking about it, and you and I are on the same page as far as that's concerned.
Yep.
I just wanna, if we can put a measure in place in the meantime to eliminate the bottleneck at Main and Center, then maybe we ought to be looking at that.
I'm amenable. I mean, we've got the ordinance language probably
Okay,
drafted.
so I got 1, 2, Christie, now you're all done, Lee?
I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't, how does that make us appear as far as business friendly?
Well, local traffic's not gonna be affected. I mean, it's.
With any luck, it'll make it easier to get around Gardner and.
So I understand what we're talking about. We're talking about, shutting down, traffic that's en route to other places, not traffic that's en route to places within Gardner.
Yeah, delivery traffic is never really subject to truck route restrictions.
Right.
I mean, they're making deliveries.
I would be amenable to studying it, or to hearing, what staff might have to say on the subject.
Because I wonder how you, obviously, you know, shipping containers on the backs of trucks or cargo containers, we know those are probably not going to individual houses. But
No, they're not.
I imagine there's a lot of other trucks gonna go in and out of the intermodal that we won't know, because they look like Nebraska Furniture Mart trucks.
Yeah, well, I was on the Center Street going over the viaduct bridge behind a truck that was obviously carrying aggregate because it just missed my windshield, so.
Yeah,
I'd be interested in looking at all the options. I mean, I just wanna make sure I make the most informed decision possible.
All right. Sorry, Christie, we're gonna talk about it again.
You ought to be good at it by now, I mean, you.
Yeah,
Oh.
no,
Hey,
this is like a
give a business meeting.
fifth year on the council, 5th year we talk about truck routes, but, you know what, they're getting smaller, my guess is we're running out of them fast, so, that's all I had. Todd, do you have anything?
I have no.
Rich?
I did have, one thing to, there's, on the economic development, our commission that we're looking at, there was several extra people on that, and we needed 5, so I thought tonight we could just, if it's okay with you all, we could go down the, pick one, not publicly, just, there's a list of people.
Yeah.
We could look at it privately and.
Actually, I was gonna send an email probably tomorrow through Jeannie, and kinda give you guys some, direction and,
Okay.
and let you, we're gonna hash this out, we'll start with economic development, we've got enough people for that one.
I know we got enough for mine too now.
And so, yeah, we'll we'll do that so that we can
Okay.
start getting these other ones back.
The other thing was, I know I had a question from a citizen tonight about, the concealed carry signs on the building. Are we gonna get that? Did you talk to the chief? And the attorney about what we need to do?
The
Is
attorney,
that-
talked to the attorney.
Oh, okay.
Last time we had
Right.
an executive session on that.
Right.
So, one o'clock.
Is that?
Feedback on that, Ryan?
You know, but I'm kind of hedging my bets because some of this is the appropriate subject for executive session, specifically the discussion of adequate security measures as are deemed under the statute, what our security plan provides for, what we have done to comply with that. So specific discussions about that and then about, you know, our compliance with the state statute is probably all the subject for an executive session.
Okay. Any timeline? Because they were asking me, and I did not know what to tell them, so.
I mean, but whenever you
You're
want
ready
to
to
do it,
go?
whenever you want to do
Okay.
it.
All right.
Can we do it the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next
That'd
meeting.
be good.
Okay.
And that way I can tell them something. So-
And just real quick, we've got some of the security plan issues that we need to talk about in executive session, but, you know, we talked about this over about 5 months back in 2013. Jim Moore was here as captain, and Jerry Cullimer was here as chief. I actually talked to Chief Pruding this afternoon. He's gonna get some information together as well so that he can make a recommendation to us. We can have the executive session next meeting, but, you know, action would probably be the meeting after that, or possibly longer. Government takes time, it's like turning an aircraft carrier.
I just want to be able to tell my constituents something,
Yeah,
since they brought it
and
up,
that's,
so.
and yeah, I heard from a constituent as well, and honestly, I didn't know that you were anticipating it coming back this exact next meeting. Doesn't usually, just because we took some action tonight to be expedient, but, yeah, if you wanna, and that's why, we kind of tied down that we want this item for next meeting, and I think if we would've, Chief?
I will not be here the next meeting. I'm gonna be in Portland.
Okay, well, actually, you can probably provide somebody from staff to work with legal to talk about the, security plan, and then we can get your recommendation or presentation sometime, first or second meeting in
We can
October.
Skype you in, chief.
I got one more thing if I can.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that we had our first meeting of the Streets, Sidewalks, Stormwater Committee. I'd like to call it the Infrastructure Advisory Committee if I could, but, I know that's not what the ordinance says. It was a really good meeting. We only had, one member that was, not able to make it. But we got to kind of establish, our norm and what we're gonna do and how we're gonna run the meetings, and Brian gave some good presentations on the status of our streets, stormwater, and sidewalks currently, and kind of it was a pretty good meeting, though. I just kind of wanted to let everybody know that occurred last Tuesday evening.
Okay.
And then I just had one more thing on the whole concealed carry. Part of that discussion or the discussion we had before is what the policy is gonna be for employees. And so I think we need to, I would like to see that at the same time as to what are we laying out for our employees from an
What-
expectation perspective.
Right, so if you take the signs down, you have to let your employees conceal and carry.
Okay, okay.
So we'll need input from Alan about that as well.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know that that's going to need to be, executive session, but that could be part of the presentation when we get to it in October.
Yeah, a couple things just came up, and I'm sorry about that. The nominations for the other committees, I'd like to get an update on where we are with regard to applications. I'd like.
We have the list that we sent out. We need some assistance narrowing down, committees. Economic Development Committee
Yeah, that one was.
has substantially more than 5.
Mhm.
There are some that we still don't have enough, but, we'll resend that list, and then if we could get some assistance, kind
Okay,
of
that's
narrow it
great.
down, we can bring them back.
I'm gonna send an email asking for some specific things
Okay.
from everybody in particular.
Okay, and then the last thing I was about, have we begun the process of initiating some conversations with KDOT on the exploring the option of decommissioning businesses?
No, but we have next month scheduled to talk about some planning items. And so, part of that planning discussion is kind of downtown annexation overall policy
Mhm.
that I think would be beneficial before we have that dialogue with, the secretary.
Maybe we could reach out to the secretary's office and see if we can get him in like November or
Yeah.
something.
So, yes,
Because we ought to be able to provide him some direction by then.
that would be, that
All right. Anybody else from council? Really, are you sure? Okay. Jeff, you have anything?
Just real quick, yesterday was the, last day of the Gardner Aquatic Center operations for this season. Believe it or not, we've had 9 seasons now under our belt since we've expanded the facility and opened it up in 2007. So, it's a successful season. I wanna thank certainly all of you for your support in allowing us to do some infrastructure improvements, at the facility that proved to work out quite nicely, and certainly a special thanks to Adrienne Holloperic and all of her team of staff, that does such a great job keeping the facility safe and fun for all of our citizens and all of our visitors.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Brian?
Nothing, Mayor.
just for our public who may come back and look at this video, we, do have a work session scheduled for the next council meeting. We're gonna have some discussions on the golf course, 125 acres, core of the city, and I think it might, incorporate quite a bit of public discussion and feedback, so. And then I started to talk about this, based on Commissioner Schutz's question, that is, next month, we are looking to have some discussion on planning items, as well as economic development items.
Very good. Ryan, anything there? Jeannie, you're gonna harass people for me tomorrow about the league meeting?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Chief, anything?
I'm gonna be harassing us big time tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Always good when the police chief doesn't have anything.
That is good.
All right. With that being the case, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, and we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention, we stand in adjournment. I'm gonna send you, I'll send you an email. Okay.
Brian, give me a heads up to contact.
I'm in Lawrence this morning. Maybe Lawrence. Or we can do Friday. I'll send you something that doesn't want to share the recommend.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I can be back.